former officials under Evo Morales' administration are off to Mexico after being illegally arrested. Protests continue against Trump's Middle East peace plan. And demonstrations are held against the Royal Bank of Canada's funding of the Coastal Gas Pipeline. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. In Bolivia, former government officials under Evo Morales were arrested while being transported to the El Alto airport as they were preparing to leave the country. Former mining minister Cesar Navarro and former deputy minister of rural development Pedro Dorado were assaulted by irregular groups before being arrested by police. This occurred despite them being issued safe conduct by the de facto authorities in order to safely exit the country. Navarro and Dorado had been granted asylum at Mexico's La Paz embassy for the last 82 days due to the political persecution following the November 10th coup. Eventually, the two former officials were allowed to leave Bolivia en route to Mexico. Junior Minister of the Mexican Foreign Ministry, Maximiliano Reyes Zuniga, tweeted that this was as a result of negotiations and support from friendly countries and organizations. Meanwhile, the de facto Interior Minister blamed the violation of the asylum law on the alleged miscommunication between the public ministry and police.
On Tuesday, safe conduct was granted by President Yanin Áñez to former Minister Navarro and to a former Indigenous Minister, Damián Dorando. Unfortunately, there has been a lack of coordination between the public ministry and the national police, and during the early morning hours, 3 days after they were granted the safe conduct, they were awaited at the airport and were apprehended.
And the government of Argentina has condemned the arrest of the former minister and deputy minister despite the guarantees outlined in the safe conduct granted to them by the de facto authorities. The statement went on to urge Bolivia's regime to fulfill its commitments under international law. Well, Bolivia's former president, Evo Morales, has stressed that a number of his personal documents were seized when his attorney was arrested on Friday. At the time she was illegally detained, Patricia Hermosa had in her possession the former president's birth certificate, Ceresi's social insurance document, criminal record, identification card, power of attorney, and other paperwork. Morales said the de facto regime stole the documents in an attempt to prevent him from registering as a candidate in the upcoming elections. That arrest was made by the de facto government as the aide to President Evo Morales was set to register him as a candidate. Hermosa was responsible for registering him as a candidate in May's elections for a seat as a member of the Legislative Assembly from Cochabamba Department. Lawmakers from Bolivia's Movement Towards Socialism Party are denouncing the ongoing political persecution at the hands of the de facto government.
The hunt as de facto government to find the persecution of Evo Morales and his government officials continues. According to members of the Movement Towards Socialism Party,
we can see that they are being politically harassed with made-up cases that weren't even investigated before. What shouldn't surprise us is that this persecution is happening just as the electoral campaign begins.
The most recent case is the sudden accusation against the presidential candidate for the MAS party, Luis Arce, in a case that was started over 4 years ago. He was accused the day after being nominated by the party, and on his return to Bolivia, an official from the government presented him with a subpoena.
The executive power is acting instead of the judicial power. Why would a government official and not someone from the judiciary present the subpoena? They were waiting for him outside the plane.
According to this complaint, a de facto President Yanin Áñez is going to extremes to persecute and jail any candidates that did not support November's coup against Evo Morales.
All principles of legality are being torn down. They are fully ignoring the Constitution and our human rights. What are these elections going to look like if candidates are being persecuted?
According to the country's Human Rights Commission and the Ombudsman Office, since last November, 1,400 people have been imprisoned for political reasons and 400 remain in prison while political and judicial persecution continues.
The former president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has spoken in support of the ousted president of Bolivia, Evo Morales. Telesur correspondent Brian Mier recently interviewed the former president alongside Daniel Hunt and Michael Brooks.
I'd met Gonzalo Sanchez, the Bolivian president, who I believe resigned in 2003, and he didn't even speak Spanish. He wanted to explain something to me in English because he had problems speaking Spanish, and he was president of Bolivia. Evo Morales was a real president. He implemented social inclusion policies, reduced inflation, generated jobs, and increased Bolivia's foreign reserves, which are now larger than the value of the GDP. But now the elites have deposed him.
Non-governmental organizations in the border towns of Guatemala have voiced their support for the thousands of Central American migrants fleeing violence and unemployment in their countries.
Around the border area of El Naranjo and the department of Petén, the flow of Central American migrants trying to reach the United States under precarious conditions continues to grow.
Instead of reducing the number of migrants, they continue increasing. These people are being forced to leave because there are no job opportunities in their country of origin.
The majority of them are Honduran, who on their journey have asked for help in these migrant houses situated along the way.
We arrived here first for shelter, and then we were given food. Here we can also use the shower, clean ourselves up, wash our dirty clothing which we have on us.
Recently, the migrant houses have turned into places where the thousands of Central American migrants can rest. During their journey, a number of them have suffered from violence and are considered criminals and terrorists, according to a leader.
Migrants are mistreated. They take their bags and they arrive without their backpacks, without shoes. How is someone going to call these people terrorists if they have nothing? They are traveling without anything, no knives, without a backpack, without anything.
As the migrant flow increases in these border areas, non-governmental organizations are remarking on the government's lack of commitment to following through with the Safe Third Country Agreement, as the government of former President Jimmy Morales had committed to offering them asylum.
Those agreements that the president made are nowhere to be seen. There is no attention to migrants. There is even more repression by Guatemalan authorities.
The mistreatment of migrants has been so bad that recently priest Mauro Verzaletti received death threats for having assisted members of the migrant caravan from a migrant house.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, Carnival competitions and events are underway in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll take a look at one of them in just a moment. Welcome back. In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro has attended the opening session of the 2020 judicial year in Caracas. The president of the Supreme Court, Judge Michael Moreno, gave a report on the last year of judicial activities in the Bolivarian Republic. President Nicolas Maduro also addressed the opening session and said that his government is willing to facilitate Colombian officials traveling to Caracas to take a statement from the fugitive former Senator Ida Merlano.
I have asked the Attorney General and the Supreme Court of Justice to invite Colombian institutions that want to come to take a statement from Senator Ida Merlano here in Venezuela. They can come, they will be welcome, and they will also receive all guarantees for this Colombian citizen to make her statement to the prosecution in Venezuela before the Attorney General, before the courts. And what's more, this is a public invitation to senators and other members of Congress from Colombia that want to come, and to the Colombian press that would like to interview Senator Ida Merlano. I say the doors are open for them to come to Venezuela and for her to give her testimony and state everything she knows about what happened.
Foreign governments have urged Guyana to decriminalize homosexuality and protect the LGBT community. The recommendations were given during the Universal Periodic Review process at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland on Friday. Australia, Argentina and the Netherlands were among the nations to advise the repeal of all laws criminalizing sexual activity between all genders and the adoption of measures to ensure the LGBT community enjoys all their human rights. Guyana is the only country in South America to criminalize gay sex, with the punishment for buggery being life in prison. Moving on, the Arab League has rejected President Donald Trump's so-called Middle East peace plan. A statement released by the organization after an emergency summit in Egypt said it rejects the U.S.-Israeli deal, considering it does not meet the minimum rights and aspirations of Palestinian people. The Pan-Arab bloc also said it will not cooperate with the U.S. government to implement the controversial plan.
These proposals do not bring stability or establish peace. Rather, they sow the seeds for another 100 years of conflict and suffering. I believe that the logical and safe alternative is still in our hands, if the intentions are correct. The two parties must negotiate by themselves in order to reach a solution that each of them can coexist with. Acceptance of it. The starting point for this negotiation cannot be the maximum of one party's demands, and a total disregard for the other's vision. The lines of the solution and even its details cannot be imposed, presupposed, and preset.
At the same time, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has announced his administration is cutting all ties with the United States and Israeli governments in protest against Trump's deal of the century. Abbas further stated that Palestine will not accept the U.S. as a sole mediator in any future negotiations with Israel.
We inform you that we are cutting relations with Israel and with the United States. We have said the same thing to the United States, including security relations.
Now over to Israel, hundreds of citizens have taken to the streets of different towns to march against the widely rejected plan. The protesters raised Palestinian flags and pre-occupation maps inscribed with "Jerusalem is the capital of eternal Palestine" and "Palestine is not for sale." The demonstrators are accusing Trump of setting the foundation for the annexation of occupied territory while simultaneously erasing Palestinians' right to return to their homeland.
The loyal Palestinian people are protesting against the deal of the century, because this so-called deal of the century does not aim to establish a small Palestinian state next to Israel, but it aims to end the Palestinian cause.
Protest action has been held in the Halifax shopping centre against the Royal Bank of Canada and its funding of the Coastal GasLink pipeline, a project intent on displacing Indigenous people of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. A round dance was performed inside RBC, which is among the largest investors in the pipeline being built in the western province of British Columbia. Over the past year, Coastal GasLink has violated the Indigenous nations' law of trespass, bulldozed through their territory, destroyed archaeological sites, and occupied their land with industrial camps. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has restricted supporters, legal supporters and media from accessing the area. And it was recently revealed that the RCMP were prepared to shoot land defenders in a militarized raid at Blockade last year. Canada's courts have acknowledged that hereditary chiefs have never ceded nor surrendered the title of the 22,000 square kilometer Wet'suwet'en territory. Land defenders say that throughout the past 10 years, over 40 of the 46 articles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples have been violated. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo to celebrate the Chinese New Year, despite the rumor mongering about the threat of the coronavirus. Music, dancing, and an impressive array of food characterized the celebrations to mark the Year of the Rat. It comes amid a global health scare that has seen cities across the world cancel similar festivities due to fear surrounding the illness. However, the organizers have assured that the event poses no threat to the country.
As the focus of the epidemic was in China, of course they were forced to cancel the party there. Not here. We don't have any cases yet. We are aware. We are working preventatively. But I think the panic is worse than the coronavirus in Brazil at this moment.
We'll be taking one last break, and when we come back, an update on the novel coronavirus. Join us after this. Chinese authorities have continued to ramp up measures to combat the novel coronavirus as the death toll climbs to 259. Hubei's provincial government said it has extended the Lunar New Year holiday break to February 13th as part of efforts to stop the spread of the deadly illness. Several cities continue to remain locked down as well. For now, the National Health Authority has said that the number of confirmed cases stands at 11,791.
As of midnight, on January 31st, the National Health Commission received 11,791 reported confirmed cases of the virus from all provinces and the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. There are currently 1,795 acute cases, a total of 259 cases of death, 243 cases cured and discharged from hospital, and altogether 17,988 suspected cases of the virus.
Meanwhile, 243 patients have been discharged from 31 provincial hospitals after being cured of the virus. The patients were released after undergoing extensive medical tests to prove that they did not have any trace of the illness. They will also be subjected to a 2-week home quarantine period.
I was pretty terrified when hospitalized. When the virus started to spread out with Wuhan as the center, we felt this disease indeed was serious. But after the encouragement of medical workers and people around, and with our confidence in overcoming the disease, we finally overcame the difficult time and I survived. On the other hand, the doctor advised us to home quarantine for more time in case of cross-infection. On the other hand, I will encourage infected people and friends around to be confident in defeating this disease. I am discharged and I've gone through it. You can get through it too.
After the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern, the Chinese government announced it will continue to work with the WHO and other nations to protect people both inside and outside the country.
The World Health Organization has raised alerts about the possibilities that the novel coronavirus outbreak could become a global pandemic. But officials made it clear that declaring the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern is not a criticism of China's response, but a measure to help developing nations prepare to deal with the virus.
I will praise China again and again because its actions actually helped in reducing the spread of coronavirus to other countries. China is doing its best, and that helps. Of course, in addition to that, we call on all member states to also give that kind of attention, can help us to prevent the spread of this virus and control it as soon as possible.
China has taken strict measures to try and stop the spread of the virus and to find a vaccine. This outbreak first started in the city of Wuhan and has so far left over 200 people dead.
The government has kept us well informed. We have been taking all the necessary precautions that authorities have asked us.
The WHO says that declaring the outbreak an international public health emergency guarantees a consistent and responsible response based on scientific evidence. It also helps combat rumors and disinformation, as over the past few weeks, fake news and blatant falsehoods have been used to discredit the work of Chinese authorities.
Our trip to China, we were very impressed with the level of engagement of the Chinese government at all levels. Personally, I think myself and the Director General have never seen the scale, commitment of an epidemic response at this level, in terms of all of government involvement across all of the different arms of government, with tremendous support being poured into Wuhan and Hubei from the central government.
Experts from the WHO and from other nations have praised China's response to the novel coronavirus outbreak. Beijing did not hesitate to quarantine tens of millions in various cities and to build 2 emergency hospitals in 10 days' time, with the goal of treating those infected and stopping further deaths.
Moving to Europe, the United Kingdom has finally left the European Union as Brexit took effect from 11 p.m. local time.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
As the clock struck the hour, crowds of Brexit supporters waved British and English flags in London's Parliament Square, and they cheered the hard-right leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. In Brussels, EU officials formally removed the British flag, the Union Jack, from its place among the other 27 flags of member countries. The UK is now the first country to leave the European Union since its creation back in 1993. To the sound of bagpipes, anti-Brexit demonstrators gathered in the Scottish capital, Edinburgh. Scotland voted by a large majority to stay in the European Union in the 2016 referendum. The Scottish National Party argued that Prime Minister Johnson had no mandate to take Scotland out of the EU and is now demanding another referendum on Scottish independence. Catalan flags mingled with Scottish ones at the protest.
It's very sad. I think what it really does, though, is it shows that there isn't really a future of Britain in Europe in the way that we've enjoyed over the last 30 or 40 years. But there is a future for Scotland in Europe, and that's what we're looking forward to. So that's a positive for today, is there a future for Scotland in Europe.
The UK's outgoing opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, reflected on the long-awaited day, saying that people need to consider the reasons why Brexit was accepted by a majority of the population. He also warned political parties that people's anger against the establishment is not confined to any one country and that the world must fight back against the rise of the far right.
It's a very important day for everybody, whether they voted leave or remain, because it is deciding the future direction of our country, and we need to ensure that we do maintain good trade relationships with Europe. We don't tear up all the conditions and agreements we've received, and we don't fall into the arms of free trade deals with the United States, which even Sir Kim Darroch today has said will increase medicine prices in Britain. And so, but I think it's a day of reflection for people on all sides. The conditions that led to the no vote in Britain also exist in France, they exist in Germany, they exist in the Czech Republic, Italy and Spain. Don't run away with the idea that the anger in Britain about the way the establishment treated them isn't replicated all across Europe. And that is where the danger in Germany is that the far right rise. The danger in Austria and other places is the far right rise. It's up to socialists to put forward a coherent community alternative to what can be done in the future.
The National Schools Panorama competition has concluded in Trinidad and Tobago as the Carnival season rages on. A total of 20 bands competed for the championship titles. Guayco Presbyterian retained their 2019 primary school title, while Bishop Anstey and Trinity College East dethroned last year's secondary title holders. Let's take a look at the latter's winning performance. The sound of the steel pan has brought us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many of the stories on our website at telasurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.